Good morning.
Good morning, boss. How are you?
I'm good, Ilan. How are you doing?
You dressed like you were outside painting.
Do what now?
You look dressed, like heavy dressed, like you came out from outside.
Yeah, well, it's a little cool up here in the good old studio this morning. So we're trying to warm it up slowly but surely.
Okay.
So,
That's my interpretation of Starry Night.
Yes, it looks like it. Yeah, looks great. Okay.
You like it?
Yes, very much. That's a great interpretation. You know, it's reminiscent of the original painting, but it's definitely uniquely your own, take on it. So, yeah, nice work.
I am very happy that
Good.
you're happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see you doing things like that.
I am trying to, it just, good morning, Armando.
Good morning, everybody.
How you doing, Armando?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah. Well, happy Monday to you.
I was reading something in the newspaper and I wrote it down for you to tell you.
Yeah?
Let me find my note.
Okay. You got notes and everything, huh?
Well, something that I saw in the newspaper.
Right.
I'm gonna find it. All right, keep going. I'll tell you.
Well, the world is focused on you, Armando. So what have you been following these days there, Ilan?
I did a decision for a long time ago that I don't read anything to do with politics.
That's a good choice.
Yes.
And as an Israel, and I read, I get my emails from a economic newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it daily. So I read daily about, but more business oriented than just politics. So I'm not that involved and I don't get crazy daily. But when a situation is like today and you have a new war started there in Europe, I have issues with it, but I follow it a little bit, but I'm not absorbed with the hourly news or daily news or what is doing in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a problem because I am, as a kid, I was born to parents that I don't have grandparents because they all were killed by the Ukrainians.
Mm.
Nobody else but the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Because my grandparents with very large families, everybody had in those days Orthodox Jews with like 10, 12 kids.
It was not TV at that time.
They were living in Galicia, which was part of Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
in the east side of Ukraine. And when the Nazis came to power, they went and they summoned up all the Jews from the synagogues and things like this, took them to a big hole that they had to dig, and they shoot them all together.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents made what they call aliyah, or immigrated to Palestine at that time, was under British mandate in the 30s. And when I was born in 42, I didn't have grandparents because they were already killed by the Ukrainians. So it's a country that I have a lot of emotions against it because, but you know, it's very sad to see their kids and their grandkids now suffering daily from the Russians.
Yeah.
But the Russians have not been good to nobody anyway. So it's a sad times, you know.
Yeah.
But it reminds me on my growing years when I was a kid and we didn't have family, you know. I had one aunt in Israel and I have two, like one, they had one son and one daughter, and the son is my age, and we were like brothers. But we had just very, very small families compared to all the ones that were killed by the Ukrainians.
Right.
So I'm not going there. I'm not going there.
Could I say something too?
Yeah.
The Ukrainians, I have two things to say about why Russia calls the Ukrainians Nazis. But first, from my reading, when the Nazis came in, they didn't have to force the Ukrainians to kill the Jews. They were very anxious, and I read something that made me crazy. They didn't have guns, the Ukrainians. They beat the Jews with sticks to death. They were very vicious to the Jews. Okay, another thing.
Okay.
Wait, I have to say something else.
Well, I hate to cut you off, Naomi.
I want to say something about the Russians.
Well,
Why,
get off of
why
Russia
are the
and
Russians?
Ukraine. We're not.
Wait, I want to say one thing. I want to say one thing.
All right.
The Russians are calling the Ukrainians Nazis. This is why. The Russians starved 3 million Ukrainians. They came in, they took everything, all their food, they took the blankets from the babies. 3 million Ukrainians died because of Stalin. So when the Germans came in, the Ukrainians were thrilled and were for the Germans against the Russians. That's the
Okay,
terrible
so,
situation in
Naomi?
that part of the world.
Naomi,
Yes.
we need to move on. Okay.
Okay, but I'm just
This
telling
is-
you.
Look, we need to stay out of the politics. Okay.
No, I'm just saying the
I-
history
I
of what's
understand.
going on.
Yeah, I understand the history of that area. Okay. But
Okay.
yeah, we
I
need
found my-
to talk about art. Not
Yeah, I found my note. It's about art.
There you go. There you go. There
I
we
found
go.
my note. It's about art.
anyway.
That's right.
Anyway, so yeah, the only thing I wanted to say was, yes, staying away from the news is probably a good thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, it
Okay.
can
Agreed.
kind of take over everything.
But you
And-
want to be informed.
Yeah, and
We
Naomi,
are. Just
I
turn
hate
on the
to,
paper or the television.
yeah, and anyway, I hate to cut you off, but you know, we need to kind of stay on the art thing, not
You are absolutely correct.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's move on.
I watch the news, but I only talk about it with people who I want to, you know.
Yeah, well, and the news will drive you crazy, you know. It's,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so okay, we got 12 whole people here. Hi everybody, happy Monday.
Fine.
Happy Monday to you.
And
Happy
John
Monday.
and
I
Eloise
found my
and Claudia and
Hello, Vanessa.
Good
morning. Good morning, everyone.
Yep.
Morning.
Bernice is here.
13.
Yeah, Jean is here. Armando's here. Okay, I thought I heard John. Was John not here?
I don't think so. I don't see his name.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Yeah,
Yes,
there he is. He's back again.
I
right.
may have to dash in and out. I have a exterminator coming sometime between these 2 hours.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, happy Monday, everybody. Did
Yeah,
everybody enjoy the weekend?
I did.
Yeah.
Beautiful weekend. Beautiful weekend.
It was, wasn't it? It was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I actually got out yesterday pretty early, and I painted all day. I did a plein air painting, and then I went over and painted a model in the evening. And
Oh,
it was a fun.
Yeah.
It was a fun day. It was a
Oh,
really
good.
Yeah, we had that second week with that model over at Shane's, and so, but I did a whole new painting. You know, I just started from scratch again. But yeah, it was a good day. Anyway, we're gonna look at a couple of things. Now we did a whole series of lectures and things about African art, right? So we're going to start moving slightly eastward, okay?
Yay.
And we're gonna continue moving eastward, okay? But
Okay.
before we jump in, you know, to moving eastward too far, I wanted to backtrack, and there's a couple of videos on a couple of different art movements that I want you guys to take a look at, and it might give you a clearer idea of like what these things actually look like, okay? And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a short video, and these are only about 10 minutes each at the most, and it's about art styles and demystifying art styles and things like that. So that's the first thing we're going to look at, and then we're going to just move on through to Art Deco and then Expressionism, and then, you know, like I said, we're going to move a little further east from Africa into the Middle East and take a look at you know, some beautiful art that was made in the Middle East by the Umayyads, and I'll talk more about them in a little bit. But
You did not send out any of the pictures from space, did you?
I have not yet.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the reason,
I think we want to miss them.
yeah, well, the reason being, I mistakenly, okay, said that I was going to send out some things from the James Webb telescope, and and that's what these things were advertised as. Come to find out, they're really not from Webb. They were from another, what is this? Infrared telescope that predated Webb. But yes, I am going to be sending out something actually, because they just did a test image, a fine-tuned test image of James Webb, and it's amazing what that thing can see. But we'll talk about that a little bit later.
You know who was Jane Webb?
James Webb, yeah, he was an astronomer.
You know, I read about it, but I can't have about him. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's talk about that when we're looking at the images, maybe later today. Okay.
Yeah. And often at the end of the class, I wanted to tell you about this note and about something else I want to ask you.
Okay. Well, all right. You wanted to ask me that earlier. Why don't you go ahead and ask me?
Well, because I read the newspaper, there was an article that said it's a 17th century masterpiece made by Peter Paul Rubens.
Yeah.
It was sold for $3.4 million in the Warsaw auction. That's a lot of money for a painting.
Not really. You know, for it being by Rubens, that's actually kind of surprisingly low.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. There are pieces that sell not for millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars. Literally.
Oh.
Yeah. Not by Rubens, but, you know, by other artists. And so, yeah, that's a lot of money. I mean, I wouldn't say no if somebody wanted to give me 3.5 million, but yeah.
I think it was a print because that was from an online auction or something they had.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
No, this was at the Warsaw auction over there in Warsaw,
Warsaw.
Poland.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you can send me. Did it show the image of it?
No, no, but I was looking on Google his work. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take a look at an image of it a little bit later, just to see. All right. So here we go. Everybody see a big kind of purple splash looking thing going across the screen?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. So we're all on the same page. All right. And away we go.
But generally, artwork tends to fall into one of 7 broad categories as far as style. And knowing a little bit about these categories, whether you like classical or more modern art, can transform your experience. Realism is one of the oldest, most encompassing of the art styles. Since the beginning of time, artists have been trying to convey what they see around them, which is reality, or realism. But it wasn't until the mid-1800s that realism became a defined style. And it was a style in which artists painted unembellished portrayals of the world around them, life as it is. The contemporary definition is much broader and can simply refer to an accurate, true-to-life depiction of people, places, or things. If you can easily identify the subject of the painting and it's conveyed in a realistic way, then you're likely looking at realism. Many people can recognize impressionistic paintings. In fact, you can think of it as looking at the world through a warped glass window. What it does is it breaks the view down into different shapes. Impressionism is basically a compilation of small visible brush strokes, focus on light and atmosphere, and very often the use of pastel colors. Today, you'll find artists that are pure impressionists, or you may find artists who sometimes are. There are also artists who like to combine impressionism with other painting styles, such as realism or abstraction. Expressionistic paintings are full of emotion. I liken the style to stained glass, where the colors are intensified, the lines are strong, and the image is a distorted or exaggerated version of reality. Often, you will see very free brushwork and heavy applications of ink. The style is called Expressionism because the artists feel that expressing their personal interpretation or emotion is more important than conveying reality. They don't just paint what they see, they paint what they feel when they see it. Today's expressionists may also be called colorists. A colorist is an artist who has a special talent and imagination when working with color. Look for aspects of expressionism in today's work. It might include intense colors, or a creative play on reality, or maybe a bold use of lines. Photorealism is just like it sounds, so photorealistic that it's hard to tell it's a painting. precise, exacting detail, and precision color matching. These are things that identify a photorealistic painting. I've heard it asked, why would you want to paint something that looks just like a photograph? I think it's the challenge of it. It takes incredible talent and skill to achieve that level of realism. Abstract art is a style where the artist takes out elements of an object or scene. Like a view through a textured glass window, reality is broken down into a series of shapes, lines, colors, and textures. It's sometimes called abstract expressionism, and you can see why, because you often have the bright colors and strong lines and some of the features of expressionism, except more gestural. Today's abstract artwork can range from the completely non-objective to those with some identifiable objects. Surrealism began around the 1920s and was heavily influenced by the writings of Sigmund Freud. The artist delves into the subconscious mind. It's heavily imaginative, and some would even say dreamlike. Using our example of looking through glass, it would be like looking through a kaleidoscope. It was originally kind of a rebellion against society and against contemporary thought. Today, you may not have too many pure surrealists, but you can definitely see the influence on certain works of art. Pop art derived originally from advertising and popular culture in the 1950s and 60s. It was originally a kind of challenge to traditional art forms. The style is fairly easy to recognize. It tends to look a bit commercial and features items that we use in our daily lives. Being able to recognize some of the most prominent art styles will make your art experience much more exciting. And the next time you look at art online or visit an art gallery or museum, you'll see the work through a whole new set of eyes.
Okay. So, everybody got a pretty good idea about different styles of art now? A little bit more?
I can't
Well-
wait to replay it. But other than
Yeah.
that, yeah, I want to replay it.
What was that source? It went through them very quickly.
Yeah.
Well, it was just, it was just, how to identify different art styles.
Mhm.
And here, let me get you some information, okay? Her name is Jill Poyard, Poyerd, Fine Art. And she's like a curator of, I think she works at one of the museums up north. Anyway, she's got a whole series of videos on different art styles, things like that. But pretty informational. So that's something to think about. But what she was trying to do is she's trying to give you some idea as to how, when you look at a piece of art, how would you be able to tell that that's an expressionist painting or a impressionist painting or a realist painting. And so she gave you a few parameters, and certainly that's not all of them. That's kind of a broad generalization, but it kind of gives you a starting point, to be able to look at a piece of artwork and and sort of define, you know, kind of the category that it fits into. Okay.
I missed what she said. I missed what she said about pop art, and that falls at the end of the spectrum of things that she talked about. But
Right.
what did she say about it?
Basically, it was derived from like commercial art sources.
Yeah.
So when you think about pop art, think about like Andy Warhol, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and his silkscreen prints, and you know, they call them paintings, but in fact, they're silkscreen prints, and a lot of them are done using photographs that were commercially taken of like famous people, movie stars, things like that.
Right.
You know, and obviously he's gone back in and modified them and separated them in different, you know, colors and things like that. But again, you know,
And silk screening is a process, right? Where you, like, you're like a printer and you're making copies of one thing.
right, yeah. Well, you can have, you know, just like you can have multiple color printing plates, you can have multiple colors, you know, to create one image. You know?
Right.
Now, another name for silk screening is serigraph or serography, serography, serography. But it is a printing process, okay? But it is, you know, it's another way of making art. So, you know, what you're doing is you're breaking down your image into, you know, shapes and textures, you know, of various colors, and you're applying them, you know, one layer over another until you build up the whole image. So,
Would you spell that last name again, please?
serography, S-E-R.
No. Joe's last name.
Oh, Jill. Jill Poyard, P-O-Y-E-R-D.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Thank you.
And it's you can look her up on YouTube. Jill Fine Art, and she's got, like I said, she's got a whole series of you know, short videos about, you know, art styles and movements and techniques and all kinds of things. Okay.
But Charles, if you were going to give us a test, you would give us a list of different artists who are realistic, impressionist, expressionist, photorealistic, abstract, realism, and pop art, and you'd say which is which.
Well, what I might do is I might put a painting up, you know, for you to look at and go, okay, so, you know, how would you describe this painting? You know, what art movement or style do you think this belongs to?
Right.
You know.
Well, thank you for the overview.
Yeah, I love
What's
it.
the difference between printing and serigraph and silk screen? What's the difference with just it's printed and enlarged?
Well, no, they serigraph or serography and silkscreen printing, exact same thing.
But I mean, what's the difference between that and regular printing?
Oh, well, there is no such thing as regular printing. There are literally, you know, at least 50 or 60 different types of printing. Everything from what they call letterpress printing to offset printing, you know, like 4-color offset. When you see things printed in a magazine most of the time, okay, or, you know, even your newspaper, you know, that's basically offset printing.
That's offset. That's not as expensive, because I bought a serigraph and it was expensive and it was numbered. Why would a serigraph be very expensive is my question.
Well, because it's handmade.
It's handmade?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's better than other prints. Is that it?
Well, not necessarily. It's a different process, but if you understand how serigraphs are made, or silk screens, right? It's like each color, each color that's on that print had to be done as a separate screen. So if there's 5 colors on that serigraph, that means 5 different screens of the same size all had to be made. The artwork had to be broken apart into individual color layers, and then it had to be applied, one color at a time, until all 5 colors were on that sheet of paper, completing the full image. So it's a rather long process. And the reason that, the artist signed it at the bottom and numbered it is because they made a limited number of prints. Like yours might be like 1 of 50 or 1 of 30 or 1 of 10 or, whatever, however many they made. So that means, there were only 30 of them made. That's what there are out there in the world.
Okay.
And the thing about serigraphs and most art prints is that usually the ones that are most highly collectible are the ones that are at the end of the print run or at the beginning. Those are generally the most valuable. And occasionally you'll run into what they call an artist proof. And that's not part of the numbered series, but that was sort of the test piece that the artist made for themselves to make sure that everything was going to work, and line up before they started producing, all of the finished pieces. And those are rather rare and valuable as well in printing.
Mine isn't that valuable because it's 208 out of 250.
Well, that's close to the end of the run.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I just bought it because I liked it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the question is mine better looking than if they just didn't do that? If they just printed it without doing that process? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if they just printed it, like I said, there are 50 or 60 different ways of printing things. So which process are they going to use? Silk screen printing isn't necessarily better than 4-color offset. Okay. It's just a different process. Now, silk screen printing oftentimes is a lot more hands-on for the artist, to actually be involved, in actually making the print itself. And that's usually why things like serigraphs, etchings, different types of, like woodblock printing, things like that, they're more valuable than an offset print. Because usually when you're doing offset printing, you're making literally thousands of copies of this thing. If you're using some of those other processes, you may make 100. You may make maybe 200.
So mine is special.
It as a artist print?
Pardon?
Is that what they would indicate as an artist print? A limited edition that the artist was involved?
Yeah, you would call it a limited edition print. Now there's an artist proof.
Okay.
And like I said, those are very rare and highly collectible.
Right. Yeah, right.
And they usually sit outside of the numbered series. And so what that is, that's sort of like, the test, for the artist to finally sign off on and say, okay, yeah, so this is what I'm really looking for. And then they'll clean up, all of the plates or the screens or whatever, and they'll start actually running, the actual run, if that's 100, if it's 200, if it's 10, whatever it is, they'll start making, the final run, and the artist will hand sign them and then number them.
Did you ever do it that? Did you ever do a seriograph?
Yeah, I've done, yeah. I've done some printing, you know, in my day. You know, I don't want to get into long stories, but actually I started off doing, you know, my very first job that I ever had as an artist was actually working for a company, and all they did was silkscreen printing, you know. And so literally I designed, you know, things to be printed through that process. And at that time, all of those screens had to be like hand cut, you know, so they had a piece of film that you would literally cut out, you know, areas and leave other areas in, and then it would be applied to the screen, you know, to close up areas of the screen. So when you printed it, you would get, you know, ink going through those open areas. And that's the very first thing I did, you know, as a job, as a quote unquote artist. And what, I was maybe, yeah, I was probably about 17, 18 at that age. So.
Question.
Yeah.
With the onset of the digital age and digital printing and everything, has it displaced or misplaced the value of a lot of the traditional ways of printing, whereas it made the availability to a lot of people more accessible, as well as also the alternative, though I guess it might have been increased the value of the traditional ways of printing. So those who are very art-minded or familiar with the different techniques maybe value those traditional ways, whereas the masses who are not that familiar with art maybe can find it easier just to grab a print out of a cave art or somewhere.
Okay, so my general answer to all of that would be yes.
Okay.
What is your answer again?
My general answer would be yes.
It's more valuable, the seriographs now?
To the people who appreciate them.
Yeah, well, okay. With the onset of digital printing, okay, I mean, that became a whole nother animal. And so people at home could actually do digital prints. You know, if you got an inkjet printer, you could do your own prints. And in fact, you know, they actually had materials or have materials available that you could do an inkjet print from your own computer onto this substrate material. It looks like a piece of paper, but it's not. It's got a film on it. And then take that print, turn it upside down onto a t-shirt, and with an iron that onto your t-shirt, and all that ink would transfer, you know, to your t-shirt, your tablecloth, you know, whatever you wanted to put it on. So inkjet printing, you know, became a whole nother thing, and it displaced a lot of the market for what we call offset, you know, commercial printing. Because a lot of times, you know, people didn't want to have to run like 10,000 of something to make it cost effective. And so inkjet and digital printing made it much cheaper to do smaller numbers. So like if you want a business card today, more than likely, you know, you could print them at home yourself, or you could go to a company, you know, online and have them printed, but more than likely they are printed on a large inkjet printer rather than an offset printer these days. And the quality is really, you know, almost as good.
That's when you're buying, like, say, like Ellie's was saying, the pictures and things, you'll see there, it'll have an artist's signature, but they don't have like the product, where you call the date thing, 1 of 2 or 1 of 12. Or,
they're not a number.
Not numbered, but they have the artist's signatures.
Right.
Those are usually run off in the, what, millions?
Thousands. Well, I mean, if an artist is selling them as a hand-signed print, you know, and some artists, they don't generally, well, these days they're calling them giclées. You know, and people,
yes, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, artists will literally take their paintings, you know, and photograph it, and then have a digital file made, and then have them printed onto a canvas, and then they'll sit and they'll hand sign them, and they're giclée prints.
Right.
They'll also them, but I guess that's a falsehood, right?
No, it's not really a falsehood. It's, you know, it's a different way of marketing your art. And a lot of these people don't necessarily sell their originals. They'll hold on to their original artwork. But, you know, they'll sell the prints. And, you know, they make people aware. I mean, most artists are usually really good about making people aware of what they're buying. You know, they're not buying an original, you know, the original piece of art. What they're buying is they're buying a print. And, you know, and it's, you know, they'll basically tell everybody that, hey, I'm going to make 250 of these, and that's all there's going to be. And that's that whole hand signed series. And so it's like, if you want one of 250 of these reproductions of my painting, you can buy it for, you know, $50, $100, you know, whatever. You know, and it is signed, you know, and, you know, so it has some value. The issue with selling prints like that is that the technology, unfortunately, is not to the level where it's archival. It has a short lifespan. If you buy one of those hand-signed artist prints, more than likely it's not going to last more than about 50 years.
When I ordered something from Stephen Wilshire, the artist that has this photographic memory, and they were scenes of New York and Chicago, and some things they had on there. There was an unlimited series, meaning that he would continue to reproduce these forever, or his estate will keep producing them, because people would still want an image of those particular cities or areas. But some he had, like, it'd be 50 or 2,000 or something like that, and then it goes away. And so if you have one that's 2,000, then you know there's no more after yours. All you have to do is wait until the other people destroy theirs, and yours will be valuable.
Well, you know, there's something to be said. You know, a lot of people, you know, for, I mean, literally hundreds of years now, have collected prints as an art form. And there's nothing wrong with prints. You know, it's just a different process of making art. But, you know, having that limited edition, and, you know, over time, those prints become much, much more valuable, because life happens. You know, there are accidents, there are fires, there's floods, there's things like that. And before you know it, that series of 2,000 that artist made, there may only be 5 or 6 left in the world. And they become extremely valuable at that point, you know, if the artist is, you know, collectible, if people are, you know, out looking for their work. So
does the giclée look like a painting?
Yeah.
It looks like a real painting, or can you tell the difference?
You really can't. Well, there are giclée prints that look like a photo that's been printed on a canvas, okay? And it's perfectly smooth, you know, but there are also artists who will take that print and then they'll work over that print with like a clear acrylic, like a, you know, like a heavy acrylic, to kind of reproduce the texture and the paint strokes you know, in that painting. And, you know, at that point, you know, it looks more like a real painting because of the surface, you know, isn't smooth anymore. It shows the brush strokes and textural areas and stuff.
Charles,
Yeah.
I just read something about giclée. It says giclée is the only printing technique that captures the essence of my watercolors. That was what one artist said. And then it says 65% of galleries now sell giclées.
Giclée prints, yeah.
Yeah, I do that.
And yeah, go ahead.
I don't sell my originals. I did a painting of my father and my mother and some other family members, and I wanted my siblings to have a copy, so I gifted them a giclée of my parents of their paintings. So, but I hold the originals, and then I can control what goes on with them. But they were just as happy to receive that giclée because with the brush strokes and all the other things, they loved it very much. And you can frame it just like you would any other. And unless you get up close sometimes, you really can't tell. And if you look at some of the old masters, they have so much varnish on them that they almost look unreal. And so it kind of like, they look like a giclée, even though you know some of them are not. But giclée is a great substitute for an original, but not the original. So.
Well,
question.
Yeah.
So if I have one of my ugly painting, my son wants to have them, but I don't want to give him the original. I wanted to make a copy and send it to him. How I do that?
Get together with Claudia. She'll put you in contact with what's the name of that company down there?
Digital Art.
Yeah. You know, they'll scan it and they can run you a print, actually have it stretched, put it in a frame if you want, and ship it to him so that all he has to do is hang it on the wall.
Well, they also put the giclées on paper, whether it's an oil or whatever you have. You don't have to print it on a canvas.
No, you can have it printed on anything. You can have it printed on your TV,
just a print then,
or your bedspread, or anything else. Yeah.
And it's on the glass, it'll last a long time.
So Claudia, what's the name of that company again that'll do the digital art?
Digital Art, Digital Art Studios. Digital Art Studios.
Thank you.
In like west side of Atlanta.
Just ask for Barry.
Mm-hmm.
Barry.
Yeah, he'd love to talk to you guys.
Yeah. You see dollar bills when he sees you guys.
That's right. I need to talk to him.
Just tell him.
I need to be getting about 5% for a referral. You know.
I know, because I use it all the time.
But depending on the quality or what the usage is, there are a lot of places online. You just send them.
Oh yeah.
Your picture, and they'll put it on whatever you want.
Right.
A canvas or the plate but you can get those on a canvas too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally, these days with digital printing, you can get things printed on almost anything. Yeah. I mean, and I'm literally talking about anything. You know, whether it's a piece of glass, it doesn't even have to be a flat, smooth surface. You know, it could be distorted and things, and they'll find a way of wrapping it, that image, onto that shape. So
my son took a photo of him and his children and had it put on a coffee cup and sent it to me for Mother's Day. I thought that was a wonderful gift.
Yeah, yeah. And you do the same thing?
Oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I had a painting giclée or done by Digital Arts, and they made the prints. And for an organization, the organization then sold the prints. I knew that I knew what they were doing. I intended for it to be done as this, but they sold the prints for an anniversary gift for the people who were members of the order. They also made puzzles, water bottle labels, key magnets, and different other things for them, and gave them as souvenirs to the people who were in the organization. So, and also I have a CD, is some kind of disc made where if I want to have them redone, have it done again, I could just take that to them and they will reproduce a number of them again. So it's kind of convenient and it's helpful, and I still have the original, even though this happened years ago.
Right. Yeah. It's like once you have that digital file and you've got it on a CD, you know, literally you can take it back to them, you know, dozens of times. You know, and actually that's how a lot of artists now operate, because they don't want to mess with the printing and the shipping and everything else. So what they'll do, there are companies out there that will work with artists that they'll scan the artwork, color correct it. They'll get, you know, a really good reproduction, you know, accurate reproduction of your painting or whatever it is that you're sending them. And once they have that digital file, they can literally print it on anything. So you can have people buy your artwork on like watercolor paper or some kind of, you know, archival paper, and then have it framed. You can have it put on a canvas and stretched. You can have it put on a metal plate, like a copper plate or aluminum plate. You can have it put on wood. You can have it put on literally anything. And they will print it, frame it, package it, and ship it.
Market it.
Well, no, you market it, but you know, basically you're using them as a fulfillment center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you know, so you don't, you know, the thing is, 30 years ago, okay, 30 years ago as an artist, if you wanted to get into the print market, that means that you had to decide how you were going to get your work reproduced. You would have to find a printer to actually print it. You'd have to sit there and you'd have to hand sign all of those prints. All the prints would have to be done at once. And so you didn't have an option. You know, you had to buy 5,000 of these, you know, to get the printer to print it in the first place. And so then you had to find a place to store those 5,000 prints until you could sell them. And as you sold them, you had to roll them up, put them in a tube or put them in a frame and frame it, and then put it in a box and ship it to the person who bought it. So you know, you as the artist were taking a lot of your time and putting all that stuff together and customizing it for your client. Now, with digital printing, you can get your clay made. You never have to print any of them, but you have the digital file prepared, and then you put them online for sale. As you sell them, you contact this company. They do all the printing, they do the framing, you know, and then they actually will box it up and ship it, you know. And basically, you know, you're paying them per piece that they print and prepare. And, you know, you're paid already because the client has already paid you online, you know, for that print, you know, and to have all the framing and everything done. Now, at that point, are you making the vast majority of the money? No. You know, probably the fulfillment company is going to make more of that sale than you will, but all you had to do was tell them, here's so-and-so ordered this piece. This is exactly what they want. We have a set price for that. You know, make one and ship it. So you can keep painting. You can keep doing what you're doing, and you don't have to do all those other things.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the beauty of quote unquote giclée printing, if you will. You know, so it's just another way that an artist can market their work. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's, you know, is it as good as the original? No. It doesn't have the same value as the original. No.
No.
and that's okay, you know.
Sales prices.
As long as people know, yeah, as long as people know what they're buying, you know, as long as you're, you know, honest and straightforward with people, and they know that they're getting a Giclée print, or they're getting a hand-signed limited edition serigraph, or they're getting a Intelligo print, you know, that maybe only has 50 or 100, you know, prints, you know, that in existence. So that they can make a good decision about, okay, yeah, you know, that has some value to me and I want to buy that.
What I have noticed too, like some of those where they just mass produce them, they do all different sizes, so you don't even know what the original size was. You can get a small print, you can get a big print.
Right. Well, and actually there's, what is it, art.net? I'll have to look this one up, but yeah, I've got work on their website. And you know, they can literally, they can take any of my paintings that I've got licensed with them, and they can print them at, you know, 24 by 36. They can also make it in 11 by 14.
Right.
You know, or, yeah, and they can put it on canvas, they can put it on paper, they can put it on glass, they can put it on metal, they can put it on a coffee cup, they can put it on a t-shirt. They could do cards, you know, like, you know, thank you cards, things like that. Yeah, greeting cards.
And Art America did that too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
Yeah. That's what I say, but you know, you don't really know what the original size was.
No,
you know,
and but you know, if you're buying it online, do you care? What?
Well, if I'm just looking to fill up a big wall with a big space.
No,
and that's the key.
You give them the dimensions and they will print it.
Right.
Right.
Well, they're limited. See, they're limited by the, you know, by the original file that they got from the artist. And so if the quality of that digital file isn't that high of resolution, they can only print it to be so big.
Right.
See, so, and that's the difference between going to someplace like Digital Arts and then, or trying to sell something through Fine Art America. Because a lot of my pieces that are on Fine Art America, you know, they couldn't make a 24 by 36 because they don't have a high enough resolution file to print that big. So they can only do maybe a 16 by 20. And that's as big as you can get. Because anything bigger than that, it comes out looking, you know, blurry and mushy. So,
and it won't be fine art anymore.
No.
But a lot of people especially today, all they want is something that'll match their living room, the colors and stuff like that, and the design. They don't care about all of this original.
No, that's true. That's true, Claudia.
Young folks is just quick and easy, fine, and you know, it's different today.
Well, the main thing is, and you know, the main thing for the mass market out there is that most people want something that they like, you know, something that they can relate to, something that reminds them of something in their life. And whether that's your piece of artwork or a photograph of a beach sunset or something like that, you know, I mean, they can have any of those. You know, you can also get, you know, a whole series like my brother did, you know, he bought a whole series of prints from Gustav Klimt. You know, now, did Klimt print them? No. This is this is just a commercial. But he's got every print available by Klimt all over his house. Because he loves Klimt. Okay, it's like, okay.
Okay. Well, that was his artist of choice.
That's right. Yeah, and that's fine. Okay. All right. Oh, Eloise had to go. All right. So anyway, let's get on to the next thing. So we're going to look at two different art styles, and we'll carry this conversation on. We may not get to the OMIADs today.
Our modern, eco-friendly heat pump with hyperheating technology.
Everybody wants one of those, right?
Yeah.
I do, actually.
your mind when you think of the 1920s? For most people, the 1920s conjure up images of jazz, flappers, old Hollywood, the Great Gatsby, and the Chrysler Building in New York City. It was a time of prosperity, exorbitant spending, entertainment that gave rise to one of the most popular decorative arts and architecture movements, known as Art Deco. Characterized by exquisite craftsmanship, lavish decoration, and rich materials, the style has become synonymous with the Roaring '20s. So what was the Art Deco movement all about? And what differentiates it from other major movements? Finally, despite its popularity today, what makes Art Deco so closely associated with the 1920s? In today's video, we'll dive into the history of the era and learn about Art Deco, the style that continues to inspire designers and architects around the world. If you'd like to see more episodes on architecture, be sure to give us a like and tell us which topics you want to learn about next. Art Deco was a decorative arts, design, and architectural style that spanned the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression afterward. Although it had already appeared in Belgium and France before the First World War in the buildings of Joseph Hoffman and Auguste Perret, the movement was officially introduced to the world in 1925. It had its debut at the International Exhibition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts in Paris, after which it was named Art Deco. After the Great War, Europe was left in ruins and confronted with a depressed economy. However, in 1925, the French were determined to forget the troubled past and inspire hope for a better and prosperous future by organizing a fair that focused on architecture and design as crucial players in recovering from wartime devastation. The rules of the exhibition required that all pieces reflect aspects of modernity. Although American artists were not present at the fair, the new style quickly became a great success in the United States, especially in the realm of architecture. And not only in the States, the movement soon spread throughout the world, becoming mainstream in countries like Great Britain, Portugal, Cuba, Russia, Indonesia, China, Australia, India, and Brazil. Driven by optimism, progress, and technology, Art Deco represented all that was new and progressive, favoring modern and opulent designs. It's no surprise that the post-war society embraced it with open arms, especially the wealthy and upper middle class, who craved a brighter future, better entertainment, and more over-the-top luxury. Art Deco became a popular style for theaters, cinemas,
Okay.
trains,
It's that Friday.
Oh, okay.
public buildings,
Go in there, go and look at your calendar and go, oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
in New York City.
Take care.
It even made an impact on jewelry, silverware, fine glass objects, fashion, advertising, theater and movie sets, cars, and everyday objects such as radios and vacuum cleaners. However, compared to the modernist movements, Art Deco was a more decorative and symbolic expression of modernity, marked by a mixture of different styles and ornamentation. Many different styles and art movements influenced Art Deco. The geometric forms of Cubism and the style had an important influence on the style, as did the machine-like forms of Futurism and Constructivism. Art Deco also borrowed from Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Aztec art, as well as classical antiquity. Chinese and Japanese traditional art offered artists a new source of stylistic motifs too. Even the Ballet Rouge, notably the exotic set designs by Leon Bass, inspired designers and architects of the time.
Art Deco did find roots in the Art Nouveau, embracing all kinds of art and focusing on decoration. However, it was far less ornate and contrary to the curves and organic forms of Art Nouveau, Art Deco was all about straight lines, sharp edges, and geometry.
During its heyday in the 1920s, the eclectic and sophisticated Art Deco style represented luxury and opulence, combining costly materials and fine craftsmanship with the substantial modernization of art forms seen in the past. It was a time when the economy was booming, and nothing was cheap about this new style. People longed for speed, travel, and adventure in cars produced by Gabriel Voisin, and stylish ocean lines like the famous SS Ile du Fons, built by the French line. They indulged in fun and alcohol, which was illegal in the US at the time, at lavishly decorated nightclubs. People wore glamorous Paul Poiret dresses, daring bob haircuts, and luxury jewelry from Cartier, Charmette, Boucheron, and Van Cleef and Arpels. This glamorous lifestyle is perfectly captured in the works of one of the most famous Art Deco artists, the Polish painter Tamara De Lambisca. Her painting style was just as luxurious as her models, as she mostly painted portraits of the elite of the era. Her paintings are marked by clean, sensual lines, highly stylized forms, brilliant colors, and smooth textures, encapsulating the Roaring Twenties elegance, style, and spirit. In her most famous work, the 1925 Self-Portrait in the Green Bugatti, she portrayed herself as an independent woman of beauty, wealth, and fashion. However, when the Great Depression took hold in the 1930s, Art Deco entered a phase marked by economic limitations and moderation. The style became more restrained, simplified, and austere. At that time, the US replaced France as the leader of the style. A new style in architecture called Streamline Modern appeared, inspired by aerodynamic design. The style was focused less on verticality and more on low, horizontal structures. It was characterized by curves, long horizontal lines, smooth, polished surfaces, and the use of newly arrived and more affordable materials like chrome, stainless steel, and plastic. After World War II, the popularity of Art Deco weakened, giving way to the strictly functional and minimalist modernism. Nonetheless, the style was lovingly revisited by designers and architects in later decades and still inspires as much joie de vivre in people as it did 100 years ago. Today, you can find many buildings worldwide whose interiors evoke the luxurious style of Art Deco, such as the Bar Américain in London, the famous P1 Club in Munich, or the Fitzgerald Suite in New York City's Plaza Hotel. Suppose your wallet doesn't allow you to party like the Great Gatsby? In that case, you can still enjoy the Art Deco aesthetic in movies and TV series. The British television series, We Rocked, adapted from the famous novels of Agatha Christie, Tim Burton's Batman, and numerous big screen and TV translations of Fitzgerald's famous novel, the latest and most extravagant of them being Lerman's The Great Gatsby. What do you find most interesting about the Art Deco movement? Are there any important figures of the movement that we left out? Can you think of any building in your city that resembles Art Deco style? If so,
Okay, that's a good question. Anybody know of any Art Deco buildings in Atlanta?
Lastly, if you enjoy our content and would like to support
Miami Beach.
No, I said in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, let's see.
Is the Fox Theater considered Art Deco?
Bingo.
There you go. Good.
Yeah. The Strand in Marietta is an Art Deco building. There's actually about 6 theaters, and they're all movie theaters. But there's all
that theater on Ponce de Leon. I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
That theater.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what is that called? But yeah, it's like a $1 movie or something like that now. But yeah, that's an Art Deco building.
What's Art Nouveau?
Well, Art Nouveau was more like Klimt, and like the architecture designs in Paris, for the for the rail lines and things, more curvy, more fluid, where Art Deco was more geometric. But they both relied on high-end, high-quality materials. So there was a lot of gold leaf, there was a lot of stained glass, there was a lot of mirror and steel and chrome and things in both of those movements. So it was about quality and workmanship more than anything else. And then, you know, once the Depression came in this country, as the term goes, you know, it's like no money, no deco. So it went away because people couldn't afford to dress or build buildings or make cars, you know, that were as lavish and out of as high quality material as they had, you know, back, you know, previous to the 1920s. So
Do you think is there any other art movement that spans so many different genres of art and buildings and paintings and clothing, and that the influence was, I mean, across so many different areas?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, it's called the arts and crafts movement.
Well, that's true. Yes, I agree.
It lasted longer, and in fact, it's had several rebirths, including a lot in architecture today. If you look at most of the houses that are being built, you know, in Midtown Atlanta or Smyrna, you know, as infills to these old neighborhoods, they're big modern houses, but they're done in the arts and crafts style, or arts and crafts influence.
I didn't think of that. That's true. Very good.
Yeah, no, the arts and crafts movement as an art movement is probably the granddaddy of all of them. Yeah. Yeah, it had the biggest, it was really the first and had the most influence worldwide, because it not only, you know, influenced things in Europe and the United States, it literally influenced things in Asia as well. You know, and in fact, when you look at Japanese architecture, design, you know, clothing, fashion, even their artwork, you know, was influenced by the arts and crafts movement. In fact, the high period of Chinese painting was really in around about the night from like 1900 to about 1940. You know, and so the most collectible Chinese paintings are from that period, because it changed their traditional art style to be slightly more minimalistic and more asymmetrically designed. So
was it between the Art Deco and the arts and crafts movement that the architects kind of controlled things, and that everything was, the rugs, the chairs, and all of those are all incorporated into the architectural design or something? And that the artist really wasn't the person, or the architect was designing everything, and the chairs and everything blended in. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Well, the arts and crafts movement took it sort of was a step back to the Renaissance. You know, during the Renaissance, you had people like Leonardo da Vinci, Brancusi, or not Brancusi, what is his name? Another Italian name. But he was an architect. You know, he was like a city planner and designer. He, you know, designed clothing and fashion, jewelry, you know, decorative motifs, sculptures. You know, he didn't do all the sculptures, but he figured out what they had to look like, and he would hire sculptors to make those things. And so the arts and crafts movement really was kind of a step back to the Renaissance, where rather than having specialization, where you were just a sculptor or just a jewelry maker or something like that, you became what they called a designer, and you did it all. You know, you may not physically make the piece of jewelry, you may not physically build the building, but you did the concept and design for it. So, and
is it kind of like today, if they build a house that's like a little cottage, or if they build one that is a ranch style, or if they build one that's kind of like a European, that you've already dictated what kind of furniture that people are going to have in there, and And that kind of carries forth, even though you just design the building of the house itself, particularly in houses. And you just can't, you know, people have strayed away from that, but the design of the house itself kind of tells you what kind of furniture you should put in that house.
It's interesting that you should bring that up, because the fact is that contemporary design and architecture is they borrow from all of those different art movements. And in fact, you know, one of the premises of designing a contemporary or modern house is that you can put anything in it. Yeah. And that you can have this eclectic mixture, that everything doesn't have to be Art Deco, it doesn't have to be arts and crafts. It could be a combination of all those things, you know, and it will work within that space. And
the new buildings that I have seen in Florida, they look like factories. They're big blocks. What is that? Is that arts and crafts? It's like a square. It's very uninteresting.
No, that's modern.
That's modern.
It's called modern. Yeah. It basically, the word is modern, but it's pronounced modern as an art movement. And you know, in like the 70s and the 80s, you know, you had this advent of what they call international design, and it became very industrial looking, you know, and a lot of your furniture and stuff, you know. So now you have a bar, and it has big metal wheels on the bottom of it, like an old cart would have, you know, like back in the 20s and 30s in a factory. You know, again, because they're mixing these materials and styles and looks to create kind of a contemporary feel. But within those spaces, Naomi, the point is they want to make them so bland that you as an individual can decorate them and design them any way you want to.
They're awful. They look like factories. They are so awful.
I'm with you, Naomi. They have no perks.
I like eclectic. You know why? You don't get tired of it. I like having antiques and contemporary comfortable couches. I like a mix. But I've noticed in Atlanta, they have the Williamsburg outside, and inside it's open and airy.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Well, that's where, you know, you take old houses and you gut them and you put in modern floor plans.
No, they build new houses that look like Williamsburg from the outside.
Right.
But inside it's open and airy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They do the same thing, you know. It's like those mega mansions that are they look like an arts and crafts that are like 4 times bigger than any arts and crafts house was ever built, you know. But on the inside, you could be inside the High Museum.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, it's big open spaces. And again, you know, it goes back to trying to create spaces and things for modern people to live in. And, you know, because we've had all these different art movements, things like that, you know, somebody may like arts and crafts, but they don't want to totally furnish their house in arts and crafts furniture, you know. So they may want abstract paintings and arts and crafts furniture and, you know, Art Deco lamps, and, you know, so you can make it your own.
They have a program on TV, a series, it's called Mansions, and they show all these like $14 million homes. And you know what I've noticed? They paint the entire house white and very plain. It's very interesting to see it. It's called Mansions. And I like to look at it to get ideas, but you know what? It doesn't do a thing to me. It's all white. There's nothing interesting about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about having all white walls and, you know, everything white around it is that you put a chair with a colorful fabric in it, and all of a sudden it becomes a focal point of the room.
Right, but they don't do that. It's white walls, white furniture. It's very plain. That's the new look.
You know, yeah.
It's their personality, I guess. That's where they are.
That's exactly it. No personality.
Okay. Well, you
Well,
know,
beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's,
the wall of my house are white.
Well, you're in style then. That is the look. White. White bathroom, white everything.
And
But
the ceiling is popcorn white.
All right. Anyway,
I think, like Claudia was saying, no, if I may get one last wording, the style of the architecture will determine how you furnish it, because you're not going to buy a mid-century modern house if you like Victorian furniture.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. It probably has something to do with your taste,
Right.
Just like I like the arts and crafts period, so I want to buy an arts and crafts house so that my arts and crafts furniture will go in it.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And I actually like the way that arts and crafts houses work, the flow of them and stuff. I'm fine with that. I would not be happy in a transitional Victorian with a straight shotgun hallway from one end of the
right.
And or a big box, like down in Florida that Naomi was talking about. That's just
But those big hallways in the South, that was to get the breeze.
Right.
The front door to the back, that was for the breeze. Wasn't that the idea?
That was the original idea, but then the arts and crafts period came along and they built all the arts and crafts homes here. They built them the way they built them because they were self-air conditioning. They didn't need air conditioning.
Are you talking about the gunshot house?
Well, yeah, that was the original Southern solution for getting airflow. But then the reason people started building what they call arts and crafts bungalows was because they had these wide eaves that shaded the windows. So a lot of heat wouldn't get in. Plus, when they built the roof, they built it vented so that air could flow up through the attic and out and keep the house cool. And you wouldn't have air conditioning. So
in the 60s and 70s, we got into the ranch style houses. How did we get into the ranch style houses, and why did we do that?
Well, because by then they had, created air conditioning. So that was no longer an issue with making the house livable on the inside because you had mechanical means to do it. So then you could have a long hallway, and it was more efficient to build. It took less physical material to build a ranch style house than it did a traditional arts and crafts house. Mm-hmm. And you can make most of them out of masonry materials, which are cheaper than wood siding. So,
I just kind of think back about where Gwen's parents lived at on Glen Ridge, and it was a whole block of just ranch style homes.
There's whole cities of nothing but ranch houses.
It was cheap. That was it. It was cheap.
Yeah, I mean, during the post-war era, from about the late 1940s, say around about 1950 to about 1970, that was the style of house. If somebody was going to build a house,
mm-hmm.
If there was a developer going to make houses, he was going to make ranch houses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just saw a program. You want to hear what a starter house costs now? Average? You won't believe this. A starter house for a young couple, $300,000.
Oh, okay. Well, I heard 354 was the median average.
Yeah, I heard
you
that.
Won't believe it.
Yeah.
The couples can't buy houses.
No.
The young kids can't buy houses.
And just think of that's 20% down, so you have to save a long time. your family won't be teenagers; they won't be starters anymore.
They won't be able to get in a house.
Yeah, that's close to $80,000 you have to have.
Yes.
Just to begin to have a conversation.
Yeah, but generally nowadays, younger couples are two people working, making very good salaries that they can afford that.
I don't know.
I don't. That's not across the board, though.
No, it's not.
It is not across the board.
But there's more
I feel bad for them.
I mean, in the 50s, how many husbands and wives were both working?
Well, not that many. Not that many in the 50s. And
right.
You could actually afford a house on a single income.
Right.
What is the reason?
You can't have a double income.
now two people have to work. Is it that they want more? Because when I moved in my house in 1971, none of the women worked. Now 50% of the women work. So what is the reason that these women have to work? Do they want more? Is that it?
Well, that might go for that, but in my community, my mother was working when I was a baby, a tot. She'd always worked until she had to retire. And in our community, men just did not make sufficient dollars to support the families. And then some people have more children, so they needed more money. So across the board, it does take sometimes two people to earn enough to buy one house if they can. Yeah. So it's not, because even when you finish college, a lot of times you got college debt and you go into school, you don't have enough money to be able to save down payments. If your grandparents die, you're still not getting anything because they didn't have anything. The parents die, you don't have anything. So it's hard out here today. Young folks just can't do it, some of them.
Okay. And then the other half of that story is there are women who don't want to be home and clean house and take care of babies all day.
Well, there are.
Yeah.
But you know, my short answer for this is you can find the answer for that question from a gentleman by the name of Robert Reich. He was the Secretary of Labor.
Yes.
Under, I believe, the Clinton.
Yes, Clinton. Yes.
But he has a whole series of videos about income inequality and about what basically happened. And the short answer is that for middle class and working class Americans, even though we're making quote unquote more money today, in fact, when you look at, compare that to say 1960, dollar for dollar, we have all lost money because the dollar and what we're getting on an hourly wage, in effect, wages have not gone up in over 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. That when I moved in, we were all young couples, and it was basically the man worked. We didn't have a lot, but now to buy the same house that I'm in, two people have to work. Same house, college educated people they need two people.
That's two college educated people with good, steady, well-paying corporate jobs have to afford it.
Have to work. Both have to work.
Yeah. What happens if you're a young college educated couple who have to do gig work because you can't get a full-time job in your field, right? And so you're doing DoorDash or you're doing, some other gig type of job. How do you raise a family today?
They're not having children young now. They're starting in their 30s.
Some of them are not having children at all because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So, but again, that kind of gets into a whole other thing. But if you want to find out more about that.
Well, life has changed. That's all I'm saying. I see that life has really changed.
Yeah, but you can go listen to a whole series of videos by Robert Reich, who does a really good job at presenting, a good overall picture of what is happening economically out there in the world,
But they want all the gadgets too. They want the new cars, all the gadgets. What they want is very expensive too.
Well, that's because a car cost 30 times what it cost in 1960. I can remember the very first time, when I started looking at buying a car, and I already had a car, because I bought my aunt's GTO from her because she graduated from college and got married, and her husband didn't want her to have a car that would kill Mustangs. Because he didn't want her drag racing out there in the streets. So she sold it to a 17-year-old kid instead, me. And I bought that car for $1,500. But to go out and buy a brand new car, in like 1972, You know, I could have gone out and bought a brand new Volkswagen Beetle, right, for about $9,000. Now, $9,000 in 1972 was a lot of money. You know, it sounded like a lot of money. But that same, well, they don't make VW Beetles, but if you try to buy a Volkswagen today, you're paying $30,000.
Oh, it's crazy.
That's their base level.
How much you put in it, on it.
Now they give you 5 to 7 years to pay for a car. That's unheard of, you know? So, but it's just, you know, they don't care. It's just about buying.
Right.
But the thing is,
that's a lot.
You'll spend that 5 to 7 years paying for that car.
Yes.
You know, but then that car will begin to basically, you'll hit about 170, 180,000 miles in it in about 5 years.
Yeah.
And then you'll be paying as much to keep that car on the road every week as you do for your car payment.
Yep.
Well, and the cars they used to make, you could fix some of the stuff yourself, and now you need millions of dollars worth of equipment just to find out what's wrong with the car.
Right. Yeah. So it's a very different world.
You can't fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very, very different world out there. So anyway, that's again, has not a lot to do with art, but it is the world we live in. Okay. So I got one more, you know, to watch, and let's go see that. So we're going to talk about Expressionism now. And I dare say that we're not going to have nearly enough time to look at the Omiad art at all. Can everybody see that?
No.
No.
Maybe I forgot to hit the share button. I probably did. Yep. Bad me. I'm sorry. I was off and doing stuff.
Yes, now we see.
Now you see it. Okay, let me back it up to the very beginning.
Green black dress.
Yep.
Green and blue, maybe.
All right. There you go.
Can you notice the isolation or raw sexuality in these paintings? How about in this one? These are all topics that Expressionist artists showed in their artworks. Expressionism was an international movement of the early 20th century, and it was present not only in art, but in architecture, theatre, cinema, dance, and literature too. The roots of the Expressionist aesthetic can be found in post-Impressionist and Symbolist artworks, but also in photo-expressionist works like Edward Munch's Scream. So let's dive into the most expressive period in art history together. If you'd like to see more art episodes, be sure to give us a like and tell us which topics you want to learn about next. Expressionists aim to show true emotions in their works, and those emotions were often scary, dark, worrying, and, well, not so positive. But Expressionists wanted to show life as it truly was for them, a life filled with the anxiety and alienation present in the modern world. They often used bold colours and more abstract forms in order to get their message across, or to say it more precisely, to show their emotions thoroughly. Explorations of the human psyche and the popularity of psychoanalysis also influenced the Expressionist focus on the self and the subjective ways of looking at life. When we think about Expressionism in the visual arts, two groups of artists seem to be particularly important. Both were based in Germany, in Dresden, Munich, and Berlin. These groups were known as the Blue Rider and the Bridge. The artists connected to these two groups defined the style of Expressionism in art. So let's talk about Die Brücke, or The Bridge, created in 1905. The Bridge was founded by artists Carl Schmidt-Rottluff, Fritz Bleyl, Erich Peckel, and Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. The name of the group was taken from the writings of the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously wrote, "What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end." And this artistic bridge of our Expressionists was supposed to represent a path between the present and the future, and a path between the artist and the viewer. These expressionist artists showed what it was like to live in a modern city with all the angst that this life could carry with it. Like in Kirchner's 1908 work, Street Dresden, we see a crowded street city that screams intensity, and the bold colours Kirchner used helped make the scene seem even more extreme. The sidewalk is painted pink, and we can assume that it probably wasn't pink in real life. The same goes for the faces of the two women we see approaching. Their faces are green and orange, quite intense. Expressionists also embraced printmaking, especially woodcuts. Prints were easier to distribute, so more people could see expressionist artworks. They also often portrayed nudes, but in a new, modern way. The poses in these often sexually charged images seemed casual and natural, completely different from the female nude poses people were used to seeing in academic art. In Eric Heckel's woodcut print, Francie Reclining, we see a young model, Francie, who often modelled for expressionists, lying in a slightly awkward way. The scene is quite different from your typical portrait of a nude in art history. The way in which Francie's face was portrayed was inspired by African masks. Like many other artists of the time, including Fauvists or Cubists, the German expressionists were inspired by non-Western art that was known as primitive art. Kirchner was inspired by the art created by the native artists of Africa and Oceania that he saw at the Ethnological Museum in Dresden, while Emil Nolde, another member of the Bridge, also visited the Ethnographic Museum in Berlin frequently. Unfortunately, the Bridge group was short-lived and it disbanded just before the start of World War I. Now, let's travel to Munich, where Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Rider, was born.
Want to know how to get rid of your toe fungus for good? Then you must see this.
Good old
Top
YouTube,
medical
Ed.
doctor shows a 50...
There we go.
The Rider was active from 1911 until 1914, and it was founded by the famous Russian artist Vasily Kandinsky. The name of the group is inspired by a frequent motif we see in Horse Rider.
Not quite sure what's going on with this.
Who had the gift of synesthesia, wanted to explore the ways in which music affected spiritual states. So he's
Well, that's
these
nice.
paintings he often liked to name compositions. In works like Composition 7, Kandinsky aimed to show how something musical could also be visualized by abstract forms.
Let me stop this just for a second. Okay, now we've talked about Kandinsky before, right?
Yeah.
Everybody kind of familiar with his name?
Right. Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. And he was influenced by a kind of a philosophical movement called Theosophy, right? And in fact, Irma Off Klimt is now credited with being the first truly abstract artist to do abstract art, which was about 15 years before Kandinsky. And so, you know, but they were related. They knew each other, you know, and they were in the same movement. Anyway, so hopefully we'll get some sound on this. I don't quite know what's
And
happening.
Marianne von Wereskin, and German artists like Paul Klee and August Macke. Kandinsky, who had the gift of synesthesia, wanted to explore the ways in which music affected spiritual states. So he started painting visual equivalents to music. These paintings he often liked to name improvisations or compositions. In works like Composition 7, Kandinsky aimed to show how something musical could also be visualized by abstract forms. Unfortunately, because of World War I, the artistic group stopped working together. Kandinsky had to move back to Russia, while Macke and Mark were killed during the war. In Austria, Expressionism was present in the works of artists Oskar Kokoschka and Egon Schiele. Schiele, in particular, was mentored by none other than the famous Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Focusing mainly on portraits and self-portraits, Schiele often showed the problems of the psyche, the anxiety of the individual, and raw sexuality that was considered shocking. We can notice all of these things in his painting called Seated Male Nude from 1910. In what happens to be a self-portrait, we see an expressive, intense, almost disturbing idea of one's body. Another Austrian painter connected to Viennese Expressionism was a man called Oskar Kokoschka. Kokoschka also worked as a writer. In fact, he wrote a play called Murderer, the Hope of Women, that is now considered one of the first expressionist plays ever. In his self-portrait, Knight Errant, we see Kokoschka lying in the middle of the painting dressed in a medieval armor suit. The landscape around him seems to be quite stormy and disturbing, and we can sense that there is an inner struggle going on in the main figure, a very unsettling image indeed. Expressionists aim to show emotional intensity. Showing realistic features of people, places, or things wasn't as important as showing the reality of one's inner world, and Expressionism represents an important chapter in the history of modern art. The Expressionist ways of showing things affected art movements like New Objectivity, Neo-Expressionism, and obviously Abstract Expressionism greatly. What do you think about Expressionism? Do you find it disturbing? Who's your favourite Expressionist artist? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and Instagram page for more mind-bending content from Curious Mew.
Okay.
Little as $2.99 a month. With your membership, you will unlock exciting new features.
All right. So enough of that. Okay. Any thoughts? Like it, hate it, have no.
I wouldn't want it. I can't imagine it hanging on my walls. Unless you're just trying to make a statement.
Somebody used to tell me
it's not a very pleasant thing to gaze upon all the time, but it's very interpretive of what's going on in a person's mind and head and stuff like that. So I don't know if it tells us more about society or it tells us more about the artist and how he interprets what society is and what the body is.
All right.
Charles, I have a question about one of the artists. He had synesthesia. He was able to synthesize two different things. What was that all about?
Well, that was Kandinsky, and what he was doing is he was creating abstract paintings based off of music.
Okay.
And sort of how he responded to different music.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, now remember, again, he's the very same artist that was influenced by the, movement of, or the philosophy of theosophy and Alma off Klimt, who predated him, like I said, by about 15 years, doing abstract work. But, one of the important things about Expressionism, and if you put it in context, Expressionism was beginning really at that same time period as sort of toward the tail end of Art Nouveau, right? And at the same time, you had the post-impressionist in particularly like in the Netherlands, France, somewhat in Italy, things like that. And they were all simultaneously happening. It's not like one came after the other, but they were influences on each other. Yeah. So, and then you have this movement, it was called Falvism, right? Which was part of the post-impressionist movement, with all the rich, bright colors, right? Like Voltan and several other artists. But again, you know, they all these art movements influenced each other, you know, and so a lot of these artists knew each other, and they, you know, they may not be painting the same way. You know, one may be, you know, a expressionist artist, the other may be a post-impressionist, you know, but they're looking at each other's art, they're talking to each other, they're sharing ideas. And all of this is just pre, like, World War I, okay? Which, by the way, if you don't remember the dates, was around about 1917, okay? So, you know.
What artist would be post-expressionism?
I'm sorry, what?
What artist is post-expressionism?
You mean post-impressionism?
Expressionism.
No, it's post-impressionism.
Oh, it's post-impressionist?
Yes. Yeah, somebody like Vincent van Gogh.
Okay, Van Gogh. Okay, I got that.
Yeah, he wasn't an impressionist. He was a post-impressionist.
Oh, he was post. Okay, impression.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then came expressionism?
No, about the same time.
Okay, so who was an expressionism? Kandinsky?
Kandinsky was an expressionist. You could kind of say that Egon Schiele was an expressionist artist. You know, expressionism kind of happened more like in Germany, Austria, you know, kind of that Central and Eastern European area.
After that is abstract and modern?
Well, they had both representational expressionism, such as Schiele, and then they had totally abstract expressionism, like Kandinsky. They were all part of the same movement, really. You know, it didn't, you know, with the expressionist movement, it didn't matter whether you painted representationally or totally abstract. It was more about you were painting your emotions. So let me do a poll here, okay? Everybody, is anybody not familiar with the painting The Scream by Edvard Munch?
I'm not.
I am.
Okay.
You know,
I'm not.
the guy, you know, with the hands, you know.
Oh, yes.
I've seen it with you even 2 or 3 times.
Is that expressionism?
Knows that one from the movies.
Is the Scream expressionism?
That is an expressionist painting.
Okay.
So how many people have a print or a copy of that somewhere in their house?
No way.
If it is, it's in a book that I
Yeah. No, believe me. Probably a good third of America has a print of that somewhere in their house. It's like one of the most widely published images of all time. Okay. But again, you know, that's an expressionist painting. Okay. So you can't write off expressionism as not being an important art movement. It certainly was. And it was certainly a lead up to, you know, a lot of the, what we call contemporary and modern art movements. Because what you have to remember about the influence of these movements is not necessarily the materials or the style that it was done in, but it was sort of the philosophy or what they were talking about. You see, because as time came, you know, from say the early 1800s, around about 1830 through about, you know, 1970, you know, you slowly had this shift of artists viewing subject matter of, rather than, you know, talking about these grand ideals and things like that, and, you know, like, you know, for example, mythology or religion or something like that, it began to focus more and more on reality. You know, the reality, not necessarily for the super wealthy, but for common people. What was the common experience of people? You know, how did people actually live? Not only in Europe, you know, but you had, you know, people you know, who packed up and went to Tahiti, right? You know, and other artists who went to South America and other places and did paintings and sent them back to Europe. Why? Because people were interested, you know, in how people lived in other parts of the world. You know, why, you know, and you can fault this all you want, and we talked about this when we studied Africa. You know, why did a lot of the Germans who went to different parts of Africa basically appropriate the art and send it all back to Germany, to Berlin, to Munich, places like that? Because those people, you know, the German people, you know, and Europeans in general, they had a thirst, you know, for, you know, trying to understand and trying to know how other people lived in the world. And a lot of that came from the sense that people felt out of control. They felt like society was moving too fast, like it was changing too fast, like all of the traditions and all of the foundations that they had grown up with, you know, when they were much younger, were quickly disappearing, you know, in this, you know, modern age. And there was a lot of anxiety in Europe around that time. So they were beginning to look back at older cultures, you know, more tribal cultures, you know, cultures that were long lasting, that had, you know, what they would consider traditional values. So, you know, long and short of this conversation is all of these art movements were a reflection of their time, but they also influenced each other, you know, and they influenced the next generation of artists, you know, because they gave them a foundation of asking questions about, why am I making art? What kind of art am I making? What am I trying to say here? What am I talking about? What's the conversation? And then who am I talking to? You know, am I talking to the rich and elite? You know, am I trying to please a king or a pope or, you know, somebody in power? Or am I trying to create art and sell art to, you know, more upwardly mobile and more affluent middle class now? And so, you know, all of those things were changing and artists were reacting, you know, to that. So it's, you know, it's a much more complex story than, you know, than is really easily explained. And all you can do is you have to look at all of these things and understand the influences of them and the influences that, you know, that they had on them from other art movements in other parts of the world. So anyway, that's all I got. Anybody got any questions about any of that?
Yeah. Oh, it was very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So, you know, next time you look at a painting, you know, you can ask yourself, is that an expressionist painting? Is it an impressionist painting? Is it a realist painting? You know, and kind of.
Or is it something new? Or is it something new? It's something new because we the people that were in those periods didn't know what period they were in. They were just painting. And then after we got on the other side of it, 50 years later, we said, okay, that was the Art Deco period, or that was the Impressionist period, or that was the modern period. So we're just evolving. And when we're evolving, with painting, we don't know what period this is going to be considered that we're doing right now. It may be the digital period. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, no, we won't really know what people 100 years from now will refer to this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I keep going back to this idea, you know, that I want to emphasize to you, that life today and cultures are becoming more homogeneous. Artists today are painting in all those styles, you know, with all those approaches. And they, you know, and they're approaching them with all those very same questions that the Impressionist or the Expressionist or the people in the arts and crafts movement we're asking. You know, we're still asking those same questions today and trying to find, you know, a relevant way of expressing them. So, you know, it hasn't changed much.
What's most popular today? What would you say is the most popular art today that the artists are doing?
Well, there's definitely a swing back to realism. You know, we've talked about that quite a bit, you know, with the, you know, figurative art, you know, fantasy art, you know, plein air painters, landscape painters, you know, I mean, there's a lot of artists who have kind of gone away from, you know, the kind of entrenched abstract expressionist teachings of colleges and universities in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. And they're kind of rebelling, and they're going back to drawing skills, you know, fundamentals, things that, you know, were relevant, you know, in the Renaissance. You know, so a lot of artists are going back and kind of embracing that academic, you know, approach to art and understanding, you know, the figure and anatomy and things like that, and how to draw competently and realistically. And that's a very, very strong movement right now. You know, because people appreciate it, they understand it. You know, we've done the abstract thing, and the problem, you know, the problem with abstract art academically is that it sort of took over the university system. And so, you know, people wanting to learn how to draw and things like that, they went to these university art programs, and there was nobody there that could teach them actually how to draw, because the instructor didn't know how to draw, because they never learned. They didn't go through that traditional educational process. That's changing, you know, that's changing very rapidly now. Now, if you go to most universities and things like that, they have life drawing classes. They have anatomy classes. They have studio painting classes with instructors that actually can show you how to mix color and how to layer paint and talk about technical aspects of how you construct a painting so that it's archival. You know, I mean, it's not everywhere yet, but it's definitely going back that direction.
Well, thank you for teaching us like that, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate your instruction, so that the traditional method, so we can get a great foundation and be able to move beyond that.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, me coming up as an artist, you know, I found myself kind of at an impasse, because when I first started going back to college, when I first started going to college, I was living in a gallery, you know, on Cannery Row, and I was painting landscapes. But then when I would go to school and I would step into the art studio, I had a university professor who, you know, basically I saw him twice the whole semester. I saw him the first week, of which he took everybody in the class into the studio. He pointed out where the easels were. He pointed out where the cabinet with the paint and supplies were, you know, and then he walked out of the room. That's the only time. Yeah. I mean, you know, his instructions were paint, and he left.
Oh my goodness.
Where did he go?
Huh?
Where did he go?
He was in his office for the whole rest of the semester. The next time I saw him was at the end, at the last class, when he did a critique.
Hey,
Well, at least he gave you a critique.
Charles?
Yes.
You know, you have us drawing figures and things, and you had mentioned at one time doing sort of a presentation on anatomy for
Mhm.
artists.
Right.
And we get a little bit more of that direction to see more of the anatomy, and we're drawing the figures and we're looking at form and shape and but is there a basic anatomy for artists?
You know, it's funny that you should ask that, because this Friday you're going to be drawing some very interesting things.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Many
You
of
read
you
our
are-
minds. You read our
Many
minds.
Many of you are going to be pulling your hair out, but yeah, because you'll be drawing rib cages and spines and skulls and, you know, arms, you know, arm bones, all connected.
It's that necessary part you have to do that is maybe not fun, but you have to get that basis. You know, it's not something you put on yourself, but if your instructor puts it on you, then you go ahead and do it.
Believe it or not, you know, the human skull is probably one of the most interesting things you could possibly draw. And then, you know, when you begin to look at it from all four sides, front, back, and two sides, and you begin to understand the underlying structures and form, and then how that relates to the features of your face, and how your eyes actually do sit into a socket, you know, in that skull, and you have a good understanding of what a skull actually looks like. It makes a lot of difference in your ability to draw it, you know, and it begins to make sense, you know, why the mouth, you know, sits on this kind of round orbital muscle, you know, and when I talk about the orbit of the mouth, and you can see exactly, you know, where it begins and ends, and now you'll know where it attaches, you know, to those bones, so that you'll know, oh, okay, you know, that's where that thing is anchored at, and now I know why the mouth works the way it works. So
the skull is a very popular airbrushing image to do.
Sure.
But not for the same reasons, I don't believe.
No. Well, the skulls, you know, and, you know, you look at all cultures, okay? And I mean, I'm talking about any culture, whether from Africa, from the Americas, from Europe. You know, it's an ancient symbol that goes back, you know, millennia. And it, in every culture, it has this very loaded kind of connotation to it. And what it means in each culture is, you know, is very different. So, you know, when people see skulls, particularly human skulls, in some people that brings up fear, you know, and dread. In other people, you know, it, you know, is a curiosity. It's something that they're, you know, curious about. So, you know, people react to those things very, very differently. So, and your, you know, your culture, the culture you were raised in, has a lot to do with influencing, you know, how you react to those things. So, you know, same thing with, pardon?
I was going to say, when Idi Amin, he killed all those people in Africa, and they had like thousands and thousands, a whole image of skulls from the people who had died during the massacre. Just thousands of, all just like a pyramid. It was just it had to be a heartstring, knowing that at some point that belonged to a human being that was massacred, you know. So.
Have you ever been to Rome?
No.
If you ever travel to Rome, one of the things to see in Rome is go to the catacombs.
Catacombs, okay.
Yeah, that's if you understand anything about the architecture and construction of cities, what happens over time in ancient cities is that they'll build one city on top of another. At one point in time, those catacombs were actually ground level, but now they're buried under layers and layers of buildings. And so they're pretty deep down. But if you go into the catacombs under Rome, you'll literally find walls that are made of nothing but stacked skulls of people, you know, because that's how they buried them, you know. And so, you know, it can be a bit of a disturbing sight, you know, when you go through them. But you know, that was early. Well, it was early pagan religions, but
Thanks for the clarification, Greg.
yeah, but then the you know, then the Christians actually adopted it as well, and so you know, there's lots of them there.
How do you get rid of your human remains?
Yeah. Well,
when the spirit is gone, that person is gone. What do you do with the vehicle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you go.
Yeah, but it was a lot of the early Christians who actually, you know, made those mortar and cement walls and embedded skulls in them, because it was a way of preserving them and storing them and keeping them down there.
Is it true or not true? I don't know. I just heard this once upon a time that in France you rent a plot for 100 years or 99 years, and then your body is dug up and you go into the catacombs in wherever. I don't know. Maybe that's just a myth that I've.
Yeah, I don't really know. You know, I lived in France for about 9 months, but that's something I never really came across. But it wouldn't surprise me, you know, because the one thing about Europeans are they're particularly frugal with the use of land, and they're not like Americans who will put, you know, these big expansive graveyards that cover literally hundreds and hundreds of acres. You know, a European would look at that and go, no, there's no way we're doing that. You know, even for large cities, you know, like Paris and things like that, if you go to the graveyards, they're relatively small and they're very, very densely packed. You know, I mean, they don't leave like 6 feet between you and the next person. I mean, you're like right next to each other. So, you know, again, it's a cultural thing. Yeah, but that's an interesting question, Bob. I don't really know about France. Mm-hmm. You know, I know in Japan, the tradition is that they'll take your body, and every family has a crypt, and they'll put the body in there. And then as the body decays and, you know, gets to the point where it's just bone, they'll sweep up the dust and they'll put it in an urn, in a pot.
That's what we do in Colombia.
Yeah. And then, you know, for the, you know, and whatever space is open, the next family member goes there, you know, until they decay, and you can put them into a pot, but they all end up in an urn.
In Colombia, they bury at the 5-4 year, they exhume the bones and put it in a small box and I put it in a cubby hole there forever. Okay. That's how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, one of the...
That's efficient. That's efficient right there.
Yeah, well, humans have been doing that for millions of years. I mean, if you go back, has anybody done any reading on, there's an ancient city, it's called, what is it, Goebi Tetley or something like that. It's not in Israel. I think it's like in Iraq, like northern Iraq or something like that, maybe Armenia. And this is about 12,000 years that you're going back, you know, when this city was built. And this is like one of the very first cities. It like predates the city of Ur by about 3,000 years. And one of the practices there was that they would bury the family members in the home. You know, they had dirt floors. And so they would actually bury, you know, whoever it was in the family who died, they would bury them right there in the floor. And then, as Armando was suggesting, after a period of time, they would dig them up when they were nothing but bone, and then they would, you know, put them into like a little container and then rebury them. And that space was then used for the next person.
Yep.
But the whole family, you know, they kept their ancestors right there in the home for generations. You know, I mean, you might be talking, you know, 15, 20 generations who are buried right there in that space. So,
well, they say that there are some here in Georgia, in the Atlanta area. So you might want to check your Google and see if that's so. They, you know, and they were saying that there was discovered 4 unusual catacombs and crypts in Georgia. The small cemetery is all that remains of Atlanta's first Black communities, the catacomb.
yeah.
So, and there's it's just how they bury people, I guess. You know.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
I had never noticed it, but actually I was driving through, it's what we call Buckhead, but it was only like about 2 blocks from the governor's mansion. There's a small cemetery that's off, you know, on a small plot that's next to, you
It's
know,
on the corner, yes. Yeah.
fairly
The place
large.
of burial.
Yeah. Yeah, but, and with old gravestones, and it's all grown over. I mean, driving, you know, by it, unless you look really carefully, you would never see the gravestones in there.
It's another one on Far Road, because across the street used to be a church. There used to be a Black community. And then they were, the cemetery is still there in a park, but it's abandoned. Yeah, but they're on Far Road, yes.
Right. Yeah, so there are little cemeteries all over the place, you know.
Yeah.
James Michener wrote a book called The Source.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on the rebuilding of city on top of city on top of city, or how that whole area was the different generations rebuilt over of the city. It's quite interesting. It's quite long, but it's an interesting book.
Yeah. Well,
all of his were.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bob.
All of his were long.
I'm sorry. Were you breaking up?
Yes.
All of James Michener's books are quite long.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, this is maybe as long or longer than the book Hawaii. But it is very interesting.
Well, anyway, we're over time now by a little bit, but
Hold on, I have a request before you go.
yeah. What's your request?
I have a big problem in doing noses and mouth.
You have
one day, I
problem
probably you have done it. Can you present to make a nose or the mouth? I have big problem. I have been even doing it in a paper trying to practice it. Can you one day present the way that is easier for people like me when we're painting a face to do the nose and the mouth?
Yeah, we'll go back over that again. You know, we're getting back into like understanding some anatomy. And remember, well, you weren't, you were here for the drawing class on Friday, right?
This past Friday, yes.
Okay, yeah. And remember we drew the female torso?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, we're gonna be doing more things like that have not the skin on them, but the muscles and the bones. Okay. And in fact, I got one of the head that just shows all the muscles in the face so that you'll be able to see kind of the underlying musculature, you know, and how they attach to the bones.
All right.
Okay. And in fact, we're going to be doing stuff like that this Friday. So don't miss it if you want to know.
Okay, I try not to.
I want to know, but I can't come to the classes. So.
Yep.
All right.
Anyway, I
See
hope
you
everybody
tomorrow.
has a great Monday. Okay. And, you know, let me know if you need anything.
Okay.
I will be sending out some images from that telescope, you know, as I gather them up. But anyway, we will see you tomorrow. We have a share, right?
Okay.
So if you're working on something, send it on in. I'm going to be showing you what I did yesterday. You know, I went out and did a little plein air painting, and I went back for that second session of that figure group. So I'll be sharing those and some other things that I'm working on. So I'd like to see what you're working on as well. Right, Claudia?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.